So comments. We'll give a minute to see if anybody joins us, but whew, that's a warm day. Been outside today?
Yep.
It's freaking hot.
Yeah. I got up this morning and went and gave blood early, and then I, picked up groceries and then came home and I just been sitting in a hot house.
All right. Well, welcome to another Draw and Chat with Art Till Dawn. That's me, Michael, Art Till Dawn. Joining me today is Drew Guitterez, UP29 on social media, right?
That's right.
And we're, I've been making content just for the hell of it. I'm going to try something a little different, even with the Draw and Chat. We're going to talk about some Silver Age artists. Actually, they're more than Silver Age, but we're just focusing on their Silver Age portfolio, kind of. And we're going to look at 4 artists today: Jack Kirby, Gil Kane, Wally Wood, and Steve Ditko. As far as the Silver Age goes, they had a big part in just making it happen, period. Drew, for those of you that may not know him, is a comic aficionado and a veritable comic historian. So I was really glad that he agreed to come on with me. So I'm taking advantage of his comic book knowledge. I'm more of a casual fan. I read comics as a kid. I know what I read, but I didn't go out and research beyond the comics that I read, at least not until I was older. So, Drew, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And so I think that the format we had agreed upon, we're gonna look at one artist at a time, and then we'll do a drawing or sketch based on that artist's work. So we're gonna start with Jack Kirby, and one thing I think we probably want to. I know Drew's kind of tired of hearing about it, but everybody's heard about Chadwick Boseman passing. Now, Chadwick Boseman played a character that Jack Kirby created, the Black Panther, or co-created. We'll say co-created.
Yeah.
And he also passed on Jack Kirby's birthday. So I'm an atheist. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm an atheist myself, but I like to think, if there is something out there that Jack Kirby and Chadwick Boseman are hanging out talking about the Black Panther somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, well, one, and I don't have any real insight into Jack Kirby, but I have to think that if he had seen Black Panther, I think he would have liked it. I mean, Kirby was a huge sci-fi fan, and I think he really would have eaten it up. I mean, I think he would have really loved it just on the aspect of it was a good science fiction story, But on top of that, I feel like they really kind of did him justice. That Wakanda had a very Kirby-esque feel to it, and it felt a lot like, the technology and the way all the architecture looked. It did have some callbacks to Kirby, especially when you see the big statue of the Panther God, and that reminded me a lot of Kirby's Panther God statue, I think Jack would have liked it a lot. So.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And also, they talk about SJWs in comics and people saying they have no place, but Kirby was an old school SJW. He was the one that had Black Panther fighting the KKK.
Well, actually, technically that was, I think it was Gil Kane who did that one. But yes, Kirby definitely, he didn't shy away from that stuff. I mean, Kirby had that villain that he made, the Hate Monger, which was basically Adolf Hitler in a Klan costume. So,
right.
I mean, he knew who the bad guys were.
He knew the bad guys were. Right. One thing I miss about old school comics were, the bad guys were the bad guys. Yeah. They may have had good reason to be bad guys, but they were still bad guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Marvel certainly. A lot of people always like to say how Marvel never really had any white hats. Mm-hmm. There's always everybody's kind of. A lot of characters are sort of morally gray, and I mean, in a case could be made that Doom, although he's a villain, he could be noble. he did have honor.
He did have honor. I would say he did have honor. He's still evil bastard.
He's still, and and Namor, alternated between being the villain of the week or the guest hero, depending on what the situation, I mean, that's one of the things I always liked is when Namor turns up in the Fantastic Four, he's clearly a bad guy. But when he shows up in like Defenders, he's a hero,
Right.
And it just kind of depends on what the situation was. There was like people could be situationally heroic, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring up some of Jack Kirby's work, and we'll just kind of look through it. I doubt anybody that watches this or knows me or Drew will not be familiar with Jack Kirby, but we're still going to go over just to give some flavor of what he's done. So I wanted to start with the Black Panther since I know that's a little outside the Silver Age, but
wow, those covers are great.
Now in the interest of transparency and full disclosure, when I was younger, I wasn't a real big fan of Jack Kirby. So I tended toward John Buscema and Gil Kane, and I think I just like the more technically correct anatomy. But as I get older, I get to appreciate more and more what Jack Kirby really did, what he did for comics, and what he just did in general for storytellers. There's few artists that can push the dynamism like Jack Kirby did. And then if you've ever tried to draw like Jack Kirby, it's deceptively hard. It looks pretty simple, but it's deceptively hard to do.
I mean, this is a great example here because it's this great Kirby pose, and also has all of his tradition, like all of his trademark, like all those squiggles that he did are supposed to represent like the sinew, in the body, as it's like tightening and springing as he's springing forward, and then of course he's got his signature Kirby fingers, and it's like that indication there at the end of each finger is a claw, it's not even, it's just a shape, but it's like those are Black Panther's claws, and these are all the Kirby trademarks all on display in this picture.
I think the only thing we're missing in this picture is the Kirby crackle somewhere, but everything else is pretty much there.
Yeah, well, and you got like all the the feathering lines there coming off of this like creature that's standing there. You could see he's like seething with energy. Again, another kind of Kirby standard. So that's a great example of his stuff. And there were images I'd seen that Kirby had done of like Wakanda, where it's like you see guys dressed in like traditional. Sometimes he would do these characters that almost look like Maasai warriors, but they've got like laser cannons, or they're riding around on these like hoverboards. And I loved how he would mix the I guess what some people would consider primitive with this like ultra futuristic bent on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just brilliant.
And obviously, he was doing this in the 40s and 50s and 60s and into the 70s. So it's kind of retrofuturism at this point, but
and it's also Wakanda is a common theme with Kirby. Kirby liked the secret city, like the idea of a secret city that was like somehow hidden away from the rest of the world, but beyond the rest of the world technologically. You got Wakanda, you've got Adelan, or Attilan, as some people call it. Even his like Kirby's version of Atlantis, fit that bill because they were sort of like they looked like pseudo-Roman, but with all this like advanced technology.
Right.
Even Doom's Latveria in a way is the secret city, and that's like a common theme that Kirby would revisit over and over and over again because he liked it, and he always, you can still mine those great ideas, and he had no problem with like, oh, that was a good idea, I'm going to go back to that.
Take a look at another piece here. Now, this is one that Andrew had sent me to add in. Oops, sorry. And this is a prime example of some of his draftsmanship.
Kirby machines, I mean, you know, I have no idea what any of this stuff is for, but it just looks cool. And some of it to me, I think Kirby would look at like schematics for things, or he'd look at like just engine parts, or because I know he had a lot of like magazines they would look at, like Popular Mechanics or Popular Science, and he would get ideas for things that he had seen, or even National Geographic, and he would take these these things that he saw and just sort of abstract them and sort of break them down to like basic shapes. But it's like when he put all this together, you can never really know, like, is this supposed to really represent something, or is it just like almost like Celtic interlacing where they just fill in the spaces,
Yeah. It reminds me of like the 3D modelers that like Kit Bash,
Yeah.
They take parts of different pieces and slap them together to make something new.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, for all I know, Kirby was looking at vacuum cleaner parts, or like right there, this thing, almost looks like two turntables, like like this is Dr. Doom's DJ booth or something,
Yeah, and then to the right of that, you got something that looks like maybe a microscope, or
Yep, definitely. No,
I mean, obviously, like the circular thing you see up front, that's reminiscent of like jet engines, exhaust, and
those like exhaust pipes and
yeah. And then Kirby was in the military, right? Which Navy?
He was Army.
Army.
He had tried to go into the Navy. When he got drafted, they let him select Navy, and when he was standing in line waiting to head off, this guy came in and was like, "We need 5 guys for the Army," and they grabbed him and took him into the Army.
I was just wondering if you might have been Navy, because shipboard you see all kinds of pipes and ducting and stuff like that. Kind of similar.
Like I said, he probably had seen a lot of things in like different magazines and so on that inspired him, but the way he utilized them was probably completely different from.
And again, this is where I say it's deceptively difficult to draw like this.
Yeah, because you think, at the one hand, you think like, oh, he's just making a bunch of shapes, but it all fits together, and it all works,
Yeah.
and it fits that mood, and and also color plays a big part in this as well, and I don't know if Kirby gave the colorists guides to use, or if he just sort of left it up to them. I can't imagine Jack Kirby had a lot of time to do too many color guides for people, but the color plays a big part in this image because it makes everything kind of pop.
I suspect this wasn't directed by Kirby, because the few color pieces I've seen that Kirby did, he was very colorful.
Yeah. Yeah,
he liked to use a lot of the, although the sea being red kind of screams Kirby. Lots of red, yellows, yeah, very bright colors. Not necessarily colors that you would think would work together, but they do.
Oh yeah, this is another. We got Cosmic Vistas, and then more Kirby machinery, and you get
kind of
a little bit of the Kirby dots.
Focus mainly on this last panel, right? That's we do have the Kirby Crackle finally. There's Kirby Crackle.
Yeah.
Any artist that has read a comic will know what that means.
This is Galactus's world ship, and I just love how there's these planets that are in front of it, but they're so I guess the thing we're supposed to take away here is that the Human Torch is very far away from this thing, and this thing is so huge that's what planets look like that are in front of it.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that.
So like the Human Torch has probably got a long ways to go.
And this is one of those things where you have to look at it with your kid brain and not your adult brain.
Right.
you know, because if you look at your adult brain, you understand gravity doesn't work like that. You know?
Yeah.
But it's very dynamic. He's got that the signature metal look.
Yeah, he was something else.
Now, this is a rare Spider-Man drawing by Kirby.
Yeah, well, he famously Kirby did the cover to Amazing Fantasy 15, which is Spider-Man's first appearance.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the cover artist on that one, and a lot of people have thought that he might have had a hand in Spider-Man. It's possible. I mean, usually the covers for those comics were done usually in advance of the interior art. So it's possible Kirby drew that cover for Amazing Fantasy 15 before Ditko had even finished a page. But you know, I to me that Spider-Man's costume just looks more like something Ditko would have made. To me, it just always feels like a Ditko design. But there was a character, I guess, that um, Jack Kirby and Joe Simon had made called the Silver Spider, and they had tried to shop it around, but nobody was interested. And then they took that character and retooled it and ended up selling it to Archie Comics as the Fly.
Oh, okay.
So the Fly is actually sort of a retooling of their Silver Spider character. And there's a lot of similarities between the Fly and Spider-Man. Spider-Man is Peter Parker. The Fly was Tommy Troy. Um, you know, uh, both of them, a lot of their abilities had to do with them being able to climb up walls and other things. So
that's the thing that the Kirby would do when he jumped from company to company anyway. Like if you look at like the Eternals and the New Gods, a lot of similarities.
oh yeah, I will definitely. The way I understand it is that the New Gods, Kirby had wanted to introduce them in the pages of Thor.
Mm-hmm.
And Kirby had a storyline that he wanted to do where basically the old gods, Thor and the Asgardians and stuff, were going to die during Ragnarok. And Thor was going to give his life to save Earth, but he was going to die. And then from the energy that's released in Ragnarok, it was going to create New Genesis and Apocalypse. And from basically the death of the old gods, we'd have the new gods. And when it became known that Kirby was going to kill off Thor and do this, Marvel, they wouldn't allow it. And they basically couldn't figure out why he would want to kill off a character from a book that was selling.
Right.
And so Kirby took what he had and decided to take it and shop it elsewhere, So.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Captain America.
another great hallmark of Kirby. You've got like that fist, the foreshortening on that fist, practically coming out of the comic. His Cap's drawn back because he's getting ready to lay a haymaker on that guy fighting.
Yeah. And this is what I talked about: is the dynamism of the poses. He pushed them, beyond physical limits, obviously, but there's no denying the movement and the dynamism. Now, you remember what can you recall what your first memory of Kirby was?
Well, like you, when I was young, I didn't really like it. I
Yeah.
thought his characters looked weird, and
Right.
I thought everybody was.
Glad to know I'm not alone.
I thought everybody was kind of ugly. I don't know. It just was kind of off-putting to me. The artist that I gravitated to the most when I was a kid was Neil Adams, because I just thought everything looked nice and everything looked kind of real,
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know what happened, but it's like I think I was like maybe 13, maybe 14, and I was going through back when they used to have quarter boxes. I was going through a quarter box and I found there was a ton of Kirby in the quarter boxes. I think I got like, 1 through 9 of Devil Dinosaur all out of the quarter bin, and a whole bunch of Eternals and even a few like Omax and things like that. And I don't know, they just seemed interesting to me, and I knew they were old, and I
Mhm.
just felt like a real find finding them in the quarter bin. And when I took them home and started going through them, I just found myself getting real fascinated by. I began to realize that it didn't have to do anything with reality. It was like he was reducing everything to sort of a design, you know? Like characters, it's like the impression of a person, but it's all about the power and like the movement and like you can feel the power coming off of that cover, like that those blows hurt, and you know that people are, you can feel the force. It's all like this potential energy that's ready to explode.
Right.
And I don't know, Kirby kind of figured out some kind of formula to like do that, and it had to do for him. It really had to do with sort of abstracting the human form and just reducing it down to like simple elements.
I think I'm sure I saw him before this, but the first one that stuck in my memory was a Treasury Edition Bicentennial Captain America.
Oh, that's a great one. And that one, what's really great about it is it has different guys inking him in that issue. I think Barry Smith or Barry Windsor Smith, back when he
Mhm.
was just Barry Smith, I think inked a couple pages, and I think John Byrne even inked a page in it. I- I'll have to double check on it, but it's kind of a neat one, that bicentennial edition, because you get to see different different people uh, covering his work.
But yeah, like
Um,
I said, I'm sure I must have seen his work before then, but like that's the first one that like sticks in my head for Jack Kirby. That's the first thing I think of now if someone mentions Jack Kirby.
yeah,
There.
that's a classic. Yeah, I had liked this one mainly just because it's a good example of the pre-Marvel universe stuff. Like all the crazy monsters that he and Stan Lee were doing in when Marvel was just basically putting out crazy monster books.
Mhm.
And it's like this monster, like what is he standing on? It's like he's like
He's
it's
just
just
holding on really tight to the
he's
building.
just holding really tight, holding his body against the wall. And it's like, and Kirby did. I mean, it's a great cityscape. He lets you know that there's this whole city there just by conveying the buildings in the background and the where the bricks are and the ledge and everything. It all works, and it all looks great. And the inker did a great job, giving it depth and stuff. And that monster, you can clearly see like this is the direction he was going to go with the Thing. I mean, the Thing is a direct descendant of all the crazy monsters that he and Stan Lee made prior to Fantastic Four.
Yeah, especially if you look at the original thing where he's lumpy and not the dry riverbed look.
Yeah, there's not much that distinguishes Thing from like Goom or Googam or all the other like crazy, monsters that Kirby used to do. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I just really love this cover.
just a lot of energy going on, literally and figuratively.
One of the interesting things about this one is that you notice that it's a Tales of Suspense featuring Iron Man and Captain America.
Right.
And the reason why, because a lot of Marvel's early books had like splits like that. You'd have like Tales of Suspense had Iron Man and Captain America, and I think Tales to Astonish had like Ant Man and the Hulk.
Well, a lot of their early books were like anthology stuff where they didn't have like they could switch the character up if they needed to. It's like Journey into Mystery. That's where Thor came from. And,
Right.
yeah.
Well, a reason I found out why they did that so often and why they had so many books that split two characters up was that when Marvel first started publishing books under the Marvel Comics Group banner,
Mm-hmm.
they were being distributed by DC.
Okay.
And DC, so DC, their competitor, since they controlled their distribution, they only gave Marvel something like 10 titles. And they told them, like, you can only do 10 titles at a time. And that's all we'll put out for you. And so for Stan and Jack, basically what they did was they're like, okay, so if we can only do 10 titles, then we're going to have this book will have Iron Man and Captain America in it. And then the next one will be like, like I said, like Hulk and Ant-Man. And then Thor's over here in Journey into Mystery. It's like that was how their workaround was they could only do, if they could only do 10 books, but they had all these stories they wanted to do, they had to slip them all into like books together. Now, it wasn't long before they were able to break away from DC's distribution. And that's when you saw, Captain America got his own book and Iron Man got his own book. And, everybody got to have their own comics finally. But in the early days, they were everybody was sharing because there was only so many books they could put out. Wow, that's another really good one. And again, color is used really well on this, It makes Psycho Man there look really menacing, and it separates him from the other images. And so you got everything going on here. You got this drama,
and it's cool how you use the device that Psycho Man's holding to become the panels.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. I love Kirby's Hulk. I like Kirby's Hulk always looks, like a real monster.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big Hulk fan, so yeah. I mean, I like the raw physicality. The head on Kirby's Hulk always looked a little big to me.
Yeah, he had a huge noggin. He always looks like, to me, I always thought Kirby's Hulk looked like Frankenstein.
Oh yeah, it's definitely got that influence.
I had read, Tom Scioli just put out that, well, not just, I think it was maybe a month ago, but that biography of Jack Kirby. And according to the biography, Kirby got a lot of the idea of the Hulk from Tor Johnson, he's like the zombie in Plan 9 from Outer Space. And I think there's some crazy B-rated, Atom Age horror movie called something like the Monster of like Yucca Flats or something. And
Yeah.
And that was, I guess, you look at it. There's like a scene where Tor Johnson's like in a torn up shirt and these torn up pants. He looks like the Hulk. He's basically the Hulk. And I guess Kirby saw that movie and really liked it.
That makes sense. Now this is probably the most iconic costume design that I can think of that Kirby did. Although he's done a ton. Don't get me wrong. But
oh yeah, well you would see, and again, it kind of comes back to like this idea of like filling in all that space with like stuff going on. Like, I mean, also I love that Galactus has a big G on the front of his costume. Like, I'm Galactus. It starts with G, But it's like, yeah, all that stuff. I guess Alex Ross has an actual, like a real 3D Galactus helmet that he uses for reference.
okay.
And I don't know if he made it or if somebody made it for him, but I've seen pictures of it. It looks great. But that helmet is so wild. Like, all the stuff going on. And You know, like, what is it for? You know?
Yeah, and as long as you get those two fin things, kind of,
Yeah.
you know it's you can even with the silhouette you can tell it's Galactus. Oh, and that's another thing about his designs. You know, he was a very keen on the silhouettes, so you can identify a lot of his characters, his designed characters, just by the silhouettes alone. But it's hard to find a more iconic Kirby design than Galactus.
Yeah.
I'm just reminded. You remember the one appearance where they painted the legs as flesh tone,
Yeah. Well, I think that's his first.
so it looked like he's wearing a skirt
Well, he
or
was
a
like he
kilt.
was that when Galactus first comes to Earth, it was like summer in New York, so he had on his like summer uniform because he had bare arms too. You know,
Yeah.
it's like his short sleeve and short pants version of the suit.
I think it was just a coloring error, wasn't it? Like
Oh yeah, I mean that's just probably the same reason why Hulk changed colors so early on.
or if it wasn't an error, they looked at it and go, "Wait, this doesn't look right. We need."
Yeah. Well, it's certainly in that blue and sort of pinkish purple. It's very striking, you know, and because I think in his first appearance, the colors weren't even that like that. I think they were almost sort of a bluish greenish and a darker, almost reddish purple, you know. And I feel like it kind of took him a little while to nail down the color scheme. But you know, that's also like I mean, look at the Thing. You know, the Thing began to change pretty early on in terms of how Kirby was drawing him. You know,
Right. You can't have Galactus without the Surfer,
Oh God, I love that image.
and
I need like a poster of that on my wall.
now there's only one other person that I think draws as crazy or crazier backgrounds, and we're going to look at one of his pieces later. And that's Steve Ditko.
Oh yeah, you know, I mean Ditko. Holy cow! Like all those crazy vistas he would do in Doctor Strange, going into other dimensions and stuff. Yeah, no, he was definitely a master. But you know, Kirby, he would make all this stuff. Yeah,
It's not based in science, so don't try to nitpick it that way. Again, look with your 14-year-old brain, and
exactly. But it's like, but again, it almost looks like all that stuff that behind him is that supposed to be like, it's like DNA. You know what I mean?
Right.
It looks like molecular structures and like I don't know. He just was like just started filling up space with whatever he could imagine. You know?
yeah, and you would imagine the science and a lot of the stuff that we know now was in its nascent stages then. So he's probably extrapolating from other stuff.
Yeah. Thor. Yeah, now Thor is one of my favorite Kirby books. I feel like he did a lot of his best stuff on Thor. I mean, Fantastic Four also, but Thor. I don't know. I love all that stuff, and like when you look at Thor, you know, sometimes he had like Vince Coletta inking him, and then sometimes he had like Bill Everett inking him, and Everett was a great inker on Thor, but Joe Sinnott, man, he could really nail it.
Right. And Joe Sinnott was on the title for a long ass time too.
He inked Kirby on a lot of stuff, you know, and I think he inked a lot of his work on Fantastic Four too.
Now, I thought it would be good to have a couple just inked pages with no color.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you get from looking at the black and white is the use of high contrast values. Like he was not afraid to like just flood stuff with black, and it works. I mean, it works. It absolutely works.
And you definitely, you know, you can see the influence he had on a guy like Mignola, you know.
Oh, definitely. You know, and that's one of the things as you look at more and more artists, you can see like little bits and pieces that they borrowed from each other. You know, pencil, ink page.
I always love the way he made rocks. You know, it's like that stuff is great. Like all that texture, you can feel that. You know.
And you look at stuff like this with the hatching or the strokes, and I just wonder if the Japanese artists that do manga were influenced by Kirby.
Well, I mean, you know, it's funny. I always kind of I had always wondered if a lot of manga had sort of come up independent of a lot of Western influence,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had found out that like Osamu Tezuka, he was like friends with like Mobius, and you know, and he was looking at stuff, and apparently Tezuka was looking at Kirby too, you know, and so I mean, it's possible.
I mean, you look at the background on this one; it looks like it could come out of a manga. It really does.
I think they were tapping into that same energy.
Now, I wanted to pull this one because we were talking about the dynamic posing, and it's like, I mean, Captain America is horizontal on this punch.
Yep.
And it shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah.
You know? It defies the laws of physics, but there's no denying that the power is in the punch.
It's like it's almost like, I don't even know if is he punching the guy or is he just slamming him into the ground, you know? Oh, great. Like you get, because if you follow that line, it's almost like, I'm guessing that looks like Batroc. So it looks like Cap is like basically got a hold of Batroc and swung him all the way from the left, all the way to the like the left corner top to the right corner bottom, you know?
Yeah. A lot of force in that.
Yeah. And all that the lines coming off there really just convey that's the energy from Batroc getting slammed into the ground.
I wanted to bring up some Celestials. That's what I'm going to be drawing for my Kirby-inspired piece, is a Celestial.
Oh yeah. Again,
I'm going to have to use reference because I can't think like Kirby did when it comes to these costumes.
and it's all, you know, there's so much going on there, but you notice there's all these different planes. You know, you got the deviants that are way over at one point, and then the guys in the foreground, and like all this stuff that's going on as they're trying to fight back this Celestial.
Yeah.
And it all moves with the page, and like as you know, Western comics, we read from left to right, and everything works from left to right.
Yeah. And you get this C shape around them.
It's one static image, but you almost do get a sense of all the stuff that's going on. And it's like it's one panel, but you know, the dialogue and all the things going on and all the like sounds as everybody's like shooting at it and stuff. I don't know, it just feels alive.
And, I kind of wanted to bring up the New Gods and Celestial. We actually saw some Celestials in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Yes.
I was really glad they leaned into the whole how big they were size. A more timid director might have stayed away from that, but I'm glad James Gunn leaned into it. There's New Gods is being worked on by DC. Eternals is being worked on by Marvel. And it'll be interesting to see how much they lean into the Kirby look of both those franchises.
I hope, you know, well, you know, as we saw in Thor Ragnarok,
yeah,
you can, you know, a director who's willing can bring a lot of that Kirby imagery to life. So,
right. The whole planet the Grand Master is on was very Kirby inspired.
Well, my God, that there was stuff that was literally taken, you know, from Kirby's, you know, sketchbook.
And I just wanted to look at this. Like I said, this is the one I think of when I think of Kirby.
Yeah, that's a great book.
It's interesting. It's Captain America like thrown through time, and you know, Civil War, or not the Civil War, but the Revolutionary War. Well, Civil War. the Great Chicago Fire. You know, there's all these different historical stories with Captain America thrown in. All right, so at this point, I think we're going to do some drawing, right? Did you have somebody Kirby inspired that you were going to work on there, Drew?
Yeah, I started while we were talking.
You got that opportunity to do that. I have to run the controls. So I'm gonna switch to. Okay. I'll work on Arashim, the judge, who's on one of the Celestials. I have to cheat and pull up reference because I don't have the costume committed to memory.
Yeah, no, that's a very intricate costume. I'm not really. I don't think I'm really drawing any specific character.
I think I'll probably stick to black and white for now, though. I have a rough pencil sketch out. I'll probably color it offline, just in the interest of keeping the stream moving.
Sure.
Drew, if you want to show your drawing anytime, just let me know so I can bring you up to the main screen.
Okay.
And then if anybody has any questions or anything, I think there's only one person watching. So if you have any questions or anything, throw them in the comments and Drew and I will answer them. And, let's see if we can think of things to talk about by Kirby. Did you? Now we looked at some of the romance comics, and we were talking about this offline, because we're covering, like, the artwork we looked at was primarily from the Silver Age comics, which is 1956 to 1970, I believe, if I remember correctly. But Kirby, and in fact, all the artists we'll be looking at today were Golden Age artists too. You know, so they were the grandfathers of the medium. And one of the things that a lot of people that just know the artists from superhero comics won't realize is how much other kind of stuff they did. So Kirby, what can you talk? I'll let you talk on this. You're probably more knowledgeable on it than I am. But Kirby was a huge romance comic artist.
Yeah, well, when Kirby got back from World War II and wanted to get back to work making comics, they found that the superhero stuff had just kind of dried up. Like, just people just weren't interested anymore. And I think it was like after the war, people didn't need superheroes anymore. You know, I think superheroes became real popular because of the war. But once it was over, the public at large just, was ready to move on. And so they were struggling to try to find, like, what is the next thing we're going to do? And I think I have to imagine that some of it might have been from Kirby's wife, Roz. But basically the idea that, well, you've been making all these comics that, boys like, but have you ever tried to make comics for girls, And that's how they thought, well, that's a whole market we could try to tap into. And sure enough, some of those romance comics that Simon and Kirby made sold more than some of the superhero stuff that they did, and it's hard to believe, but there was a time where, like, those comics were selling really well, the romance comics, and they spurred on all these imitators. And pretty soon, after people started seeing how successful the Kirby ones were, Marvel and DC all started putting out romance comics. Of course, Marvel wasn't really Marvel back then, but
So, like, all the artists that I grew up admiring, a lot of the artists I grew up admiring, like John Buscema and Gil Kane, and all the artists we're looking at today, Steve Ditko, Wally Wood, they had their turn in the barrel on romance comics. And then the other thing besides romance comics were the pulp, like the EC, the monster comics, the horror comics.
Yeah.
And we looked at some of the monster stuff that Kirby had done. But, there's plenty more out there. But people only think of Kirby for like the Thing and the Fantastic Four and stuff like that. But if you're willing to do a little digging, there's some really interesting stuff out there.
Well, and all that stuff, it was really sort of sowing the seeds for what was to come, because it's not hard to sort of draw a line from those monster comics that Marvel was putting out when they were Atlas to like the Fantastic Four or the Hulk, that's in a lot of the DNA of those characters.
Right. And we were talking about that when we were looking at the one monster on the ledge there.
Yeah.
You can definitely see the foundations for what would later become the Thing.
I think a lot of that stuff, because of the comics code had a lot of real specific language about, what they couldn't put into comics. And, they specifically couldn't do any zombies or werewolves or vampires and things like that. So
Yeah.
they had to come up with new monsters, if they wanted to do anything with monsters in it, they had to come up with new ways of doing it. So, that's when you end up with like Fin Fang Foom and Kim Boo Ba and, Groot. A lot of people don't realize Groot was one of those pre-Marvel monsters before, they sort of brought him on into the Marvel universe proper. But Groot was before a lot of those characters.
And then if you watched, I posted a clip the other day from Bob Newhart's show called Bob. I don't know if you've heard
Yeah, I saw that.
and this is, I don't know how I never saw this before, because I'm old enough to have watched Bob when it was actually on the TV. But there's an episode of Bob. The character that Bob plays is a cartoonist or a comic artist, and it's an awards show for comic artists in the episode. And this is in the mid to earlier mid '90s, and I wish I had found this thing years ago, because it's got Jack Kirby is a guest in the episode, playing one of the artists, obviously, and it's got Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri and a couple. Oh, Sergio Aragonés.
Yeah.
I was just like dumbfounded. Like, these are people I grew up watching or reading, on this sitcom. That
Well, it's also what I really thought was funny is I had no idea how little Jim Lee was. Either that
oh yeah,
or,
when he's standing next to Mark Silvestri, he looks like a little kid.
either that or Mark Silvestri is like freakishly huge. But it's like I have a feeling that Jim Lee's a little guy.
Yeah, yeah. Jim Lee's not a large man. You actually watched that clip, huh?
I did.
Pretty crazy.
I don't remember that show. The 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 Bob Newhart I remember is the one where he like had a bed and breakfast in Vermont.
Yeah, that was Newhart. And then the Bob Newhart show was where he was a dentist. And then Bob was a show where he was a cartoonist. And makes me wonder, how much Newhart might have been in the comics.
It's possible. Kirby had shown up on another TV show. There's an episode of The Incredible Hulk where Kirby is a police sketch artist, and he's taking somebody's description of the Hulk, and he basically draws the Hulk.
How I want to do this. He's got a weird electrical pattern on his thumb. Making up shapes.
Like I'm trying to ape Kirby's style here, and I don't think I'm doing it any justice.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't expect to do it any justice either, so don't feel bad. I am using a brush tip just to force me into that that mode a little bit.
It does. I just laid down most of the outline and some of the heavy black. I did that first. And you're right, it does sort of set the tone.
I don't pretend to be able to, like I said, he is deceptively hard to draw in his style. Because if you look at it, it looks like, oh, that's pretty easy, just squiggly lines and lots of blacks. And
I know, but
there's some thought that went into where he places things. It's not just random.
It's like it's not just all willy nilly. Like it's like, oh yeah, that serves a there's a purpose.
Darren says after reading How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, I think a better title for that book would be How to Draw Comics the Buscema Way, since we are learning and drawing in his style. Yes and no, Darren, because one of the things, and we've talked about that even here, is artists are influenced by other artists. So if you look at Buscema's stuff, like if you look at Buscema's machinery and stuff, you can tell that was heavily influenced by Kirby. And when we look at Wally Wood later today, later in the stream, you'll see a lot of his art. You can see how that would have influenced Big John as well. So you're getting to draw his style, but his style was influenced by other artists as well.
Yeah, when Kirby left Marvel and Buscema had to take over like Fantastic Four and the Avengers, from what I understand, they had a lot of stuff that I think they had like breakdowns for pages that Kirby had already turned in. They just hadn't been, finished yet. And it's like when you look at the early stuff, I mean, from what I understand, Buscema was basically just finishing Kirby pages for at least like 5 issues of Fantastic Four before, he really got to draw his own.
And I think Buscema gives a lot of credit to Kirby. You know?
Oh, definitely. A lot of Buscema's stuff was his early stuff was with Carlton. Some of his like first published stuff, I guess, was with Carlton Comics.
I don't know how this will go, or if you're enjoying this, Drew. But we can, if this goes well and you enjoyed it, we can always do more. I'd love to talk about some more artists with you, but it's entirely up to you.
Yeah.
So many we can talk about.
Yeah. I guess, and this isn't really Silver Age, but in the 70s, Kirby gets Mike Royer and as his inker, and I guess Royer, and it's like everybody kind of has a favorite, Kirby inker. A lot of people love Kirby and Sinnott. A lot of people love like Kirby and Everett, and I think it has to do a lot with who is the first one you see, because my first guy is Mike Royer, and so I tend to really like the Kirby and Royer stuff.
And one of the artists we'll be looking at later, Wally Wood, did a lot of inking on top of Kirby too.
Yeah. Kirby had a syndicated newspaper strip about astronauts. And it's supposed to be this like really realistic idea of like, the space program, and I guess he had gotten Wood to work with him on it because he really liked the way Wood drew space stuff. Like he really liked Wood's work in the EC comics and wanted him to work on it, doing all the spacesuits and rockets and all that stuff.
You notice I'm avoiding the head toward the last because that's the one that's going to be the hardest part. There's so much going on in that head. Like lots of grill kind of lights. And now you're a pretty good mimic on Kirby's style, though. I mean, I look at a lot of your artwork, and you can pull off Kirby.
Well, I do. It's not too bad. Here's what I got so far.
Hold on a second. Switch over to Streamyard and pick you up. Okay. Nice. See, like you're good at doing the kind of what you call the sinew.
Yeah.
It's something that's hard for me to kind of wrap my head around.
Well, because you spend so much of your time learning anatomy.
Yeah, exactly.
You think it's so important, and they really grill it into you, and then you kind of realize that for comics you can just kind of wing it,
Well, the thing is, this is one of the things I think I'm learning to appreciate as I'm older. I really don't think he was winging it.
Oh no, I think he had the fundamentals, and he knows where everything is supposed to be.
Because again, if you go back and look at his romance work in the more polished style, where he wasn't cutting loose so much. He's got the chops. Obviously, he's got the chops, but
yeah,
I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. He can do it. I just don't think it's his preferred style, or wasn't his preferred style. onto the head. That's
Yeah, it looks great so far, Mike.
you're a liar, but thank you. Just it's the heavy blacks that make it feel like Kirby, somewhat.
Now, when Kirby New Gods doesn't do well, DC ends up canceling it, and Kirby ends up coming back to Marvel. And I can't imagine he really wanted to go back to Marvel, but at this point he wasn't real happy with DC. So he goes back to Marvel, and it's like when he was working on the Eternals, he didn't want to do anything that was part of like the Marvel universe. Like his idea for the Eternals was it was all based off of Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, you know, and he didn't want to add any of the Marvel characters to it, but eventually he had to give in, and like the first one that pops up is the Hulk, and there's also some references to Shield in the first couple issues of the Eternals, but it's just funny. It's like he really just wanted to do a story about basically ancient aliens, and I always kind of wondered like what if he had been able to do what he wanted to do.
Yeah. Did you watch the Comic Con at home panel on Jack Kirby?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you might want to look that one up.
Yeah.
I think you'd like that. Um, they talk about like some of his projects that kind of never really were published.
Mm-hmm.
I think you might like that aspect of it.
I guess he did Devil Dinosaur pretty much because Jim Shooter had asked him to come up with something that Marvel could try to market as a Saturday morning cartoon. And he just kind of thought, well, and the story is I guess the TV show Land of the Lost.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I guess it was an influence. But,
Oh, that would make sense. And the Lost was early '70s. So.
he just decided to take a look and see what was on the TV that kids were watching on Saturday mornings and thought, hey, this looks kind of cool. But from what I understand, he never really wanted to do it as a comic. It was supposed to have been made into an animated series. And then what's the other one? I don't know if you ever read, but they gave Kirby a 2001 series that was sort of like loosely based on the movie 2001.
Oh yeah, I had that. That
That's
and Space 1999.
yeah, Space 1999. The Charlton put out that one, but yeah, 2001. I don't know. I feel like it's an underrated one. A lot of interesting stuff Kirby did on that one.
It was actually a pretty good adaptation of Kubrick's film.
Oh yeah, well the big Treasury edition that they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was real good.
Let's see. Bigger brush. Break out the deep brush. Try to emulate some Kirby crackle, huh?
The crackle is hard. I find it hard to do. Um, like the temptation is there to just start making a bunch of dots, but it's like it really it's almost like there is a structure to it, you know.
There's negative and positive space in it. So some is the dots going out, and some are the dots cutting into the pattern. You know, using negative space. How are we doing? You almost done with yours?
Almost.
Let me know when you're done, because I'll probably end up taking longer. So I can stop on mine at any time. That the bulk of the body does. It's just the background.
I'm enjoying this. I haven't drawn on paper in a while.
We're doing the iPad.
Yeah.
Onto the dark side.
It just makes it, you know, it's a time saver.
No, I get it. I tease, but I've always been a proponent of tools are tools. You don't make your life harder. Use the tools.
I guess that's one thing about, you know, all this quarantine stuff is that you have plenty of time to draw. I feel like I've been doing a lot of it.
Well, that's one of the reasons I wanted to get you on here with me. Is like we used to get like together maybe once a week or every other week or something and hang out at the Starbucks and draw. Obviously, haven't been able to do that, so kind of miss those times.
Me as well. Yeah. You know, I was getting a lot of stuff done because I would go to Starbucks before work and then I'd go after work, and I was getting a good bit of drawing done both sides.
All right, I'll call that one done.
Yeah. I didn't erase any of the pencil lines, but I think I've done it.
I like it.
I'm happy with it.
And the only thing I would do to yours, I need to do some on mine too, is like the bands around the calves. You just go in with some white. You can do this later, but just reinforce some of the bands in the negative area, in the black area.
Yeah.
With a bit of white. And I could do that with some of the things I need to do, especially like in the grill thing. And stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right. So Kirby, that's Jack Kirby, folks.
Oh, sorry. I gotta plug in my thing before it dies.
Okay, no worries. So the next artist we'll look at is, I'm not sure who Drew wants to look at next. Waiting for Drew to come back. You hear me, Drew?
Yep.
Which artist would you like to go over next?
Let's see. Good question. I guess switching gears from Kirby, let's go to Gil Kan.
Gil Kan, okay. Now, Gil Kan was one of the first artists I kind of was enamored with. One of the things I think I liked about Gil Kan is, even though it's very stylized and it's not realistic, it's a draftsman mindset. So he thought of the figure like as a mechanical object almost.
Yeah, he definitely has a sense of anatomy that I think, definitely beyond I guess more akin to the realism than Kirby would.
It is more accurate than Kirby's, but it was also like, you look like basic drawing instructional programs, and they'll teach you how to break things down into like cones and cylinders and stuff like that. And Kane's thinking was very much aligned with that. So he was able to put the body in any position he wanted to because he thought of it. This is why I say he was like a mechanical figure. So he thought about how everything worked together, and then he could put it wherever you wanted to. If you understand how the muscles can contract and expand and bend and joints and stuff like that, then you can kind of extrapolate in your head how it should look. It may not be perfectly accurate, but it's acceptable. It's believable. It reads like it should. So here's some Avengers work. Now, one of the things I asked you on Kirby is like, what do you first remember? Do you remember where you first met Gil Kan, like your meet cute?
So my first Gil Kan, probably I think we had gotten like a bunch of comics at a garage sale, and there was some issues. They were probably reprints, but I seem to remember the Atom being the first time I noticed Gil Kan, and I was really like taken by the way the Atom, like the figures move in this sort of almost like ballet like poses in these comics, like there's a lot of movement with those characters. And
now, one of the things I always found very characteristic to Gil Kan's was, if you look at the giant man's hands, very, very long digits.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think my first one. It's probably going to have to be some of his Conan stuff.
Oh, all that stuff is great.
He didn't do a lot of Conan, but it's very memorable when he did. And strangely, the single comic that comes to mind the most for me for Gil Kane was a What If, where he did like what if the Avengers had never formed? I think it was something like that.
Oh, and Tony Stark makes all those.
Right, makes a bunch of Iron Man suits for like the Wasp, and
I liked that one. Yeah, you're right. That is a really good one.
that's the Gil Kane comic that I think of the most when I think of Gil Kane. But the other things, I think Black Mark was a high point for me because it was just such a departure from normal comic style that I was fascinated by. It's basically,
Yeah.
they consider it a graphic novel, but it's basically an illustrated because they're not in panels really. It's just like illustrations with the text thrown on top of it, and then, like narration.
Yeah, it's like it's an illustrated like prose novel kind of thing.
Yeah,
And Black Mark is also really good. And I guess Kane had worked on that for a long time. I was listening to an interview with Howard Chaykin, and I guess Howard Chaykin had helped him out a little bit with it. Yeah, so that's definitely Gil Kane, probably inked by like Murphy Anderson or somebody.
yeah. You can tell it's been softened up a bit. It's Gil Kane, another trademark identifier of his work is the angularity. And this one, the angles have been softened up a bit.
Yeah.
And the Atom's got a huge head, huge forehead.
Yeah. We gotta have room to put that symbol on there.
I mean, you can still see the Gil Kane structure, but like I said, it has been the curves or the angles have been softened up into curves. Um, but now here's an example of what I was talking about. Like, I don't think he had anybody posing for this, so he was able to, think of the cylinders and how to foreshorten them, and then he could do crazy long digited hands.
And that's like those like when a guy gets hit in a Gil Kane comic, you feel it. Like that guy doesn't just get hit; he gets knocked head over heels. Like that
Yeah,
that character right there. That's his name is Cyclotron. Cyclotron. Adam is hitting him so hard there. He is just knocking him ass over elbows. It's fantastic.
and then yeah, just like Kirby pushing that dynamic pose. I mean, look at that punch. Like he has just cracked his spine pushing so hard.
And it's and again, it's like that movement there. He is getting walloped. That is
But
just,
and then we were talking with Darren about like Buscema being influenced by Kirby. When you look at like Frank Miller's Daredevil run, look at this leg here. That almost looks like a Frank Miller leg. And then you see the influence there. Uh, so it's very interesting to see how the artists were influenced by others.
if you're gonna steal from the best.
Exactly. Right? I mean, we've all done it.
Not to go back too far to Kirby, but Kirby famously said, if you like the way a guy draws hands, then draw hands that way. Or if you like the way the guy makes arms or whatever, do it. He's like, it's all there for you.
And then I suppose, as far as characters go, I can't help but think of Hal Jordan when I think of Gil Kan.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a character that he's associated with. There was one he did I liked a lot, and this is not Silver Age, but the Sword of the Atom. That that series where the Atom was kind of like a barbarian hero for a little bit.
Oh yeah. Sword of the Atom. Yeah, I remember that.
That was like
one thing that Gil Kane would do that a lot of artists kind of strayed away from was the worm's eye view of the head. Right? So you'll see a lot of Gil Kane stuff from a low angle where you can see the nostrils and the flares, the lower side of the chin, and I'm one of them. A lot of artists avoid those angles because they're hard to do. But he had a really good sense of facial planes where you could do that. You see a lot of low angle stuff. And there's those fingers I was talking about. Look at those.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, I have a habit of drawing fingers kind of chunky, and it's probably because my fingers are chunky. So that's my reference. But Kane drew very slender, very dynamic hands.
He did. That's dead.
And I like the fact that everybody's just nonchalantly in the background. Like, yeah, just ignore that guy.
Yeah. Or I mean that's very much of its time. Like the idea of a derelict in a park on a bench covered in newspapers. Like that's let me just cover up with these newspapers and sack out for a bit. You know, that's definitely an older version of like the hobo.
And I think Gil Kane's probably one of the first artists I remember thinking of that had like a very stylized signature. Him and Barry Winchell Smith were the two that.
Oh yeah, that GK, yeah.
Yeah. And then again, Gil Kane is another artist that had a background in the pulp comics. You can see that here in the DC Strange Adventures.
Oh man, those crazy like what is it? Mystery in Space or those like anthology books they did. I always had like these crazy stories.
Yeah. This is Strange Adventures. You know that
Strange
one.
Adventures. There it is.
And now let's see. I see a lot of Kane influence in Walt Simonson stuff. When you look at some of the, like if you look at the dust of the alien dog things kicking up, that's very reminiscent of stuff you'll see in Walt Simonson's work.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Creatures on the Loose, another monster book there.
Featuring Gulliver of Mars.
Yeah. DC Showcase. We talked about some of the Marvel anthology books. DC had a lot of anthology books too. What was yours? Because they could publish a bunch of as many titles as they wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Here's a dude diving in to rescue somebody in a car that's flung over the edge.
That's a great Gil Kane pose too.
And a very good use of the heavy shadow on the bridge to outline the guy who's dying.
And it works real. But I mean, that's also a good time saving tool. If you've got to kick out, 20 or so pages in a short time, You can save yourself having to do a lot of detailing by filling. You have to do a lot of black.
Like this, you can see some of the structures he did in the faces. So even when the lines are simple, you can still see the understanding of all the planes.
Another really good one.
Poor Adam being abused here, being used to hit somebody else.
I'm gonna beat you with that.
And this is one of the things I like for, especially because most comics end up being digital now. But I just love looking at the old style physical paste ups.
Yeah.
You can see everything pasted up. Shadows where it's actually peeling up off the paper.
Well, yeah. You know, what's funny is that those old pages, you know, a lot of publishers used to destroy them after they made the prints of them. You know?
Oh, I know it's heartbreaking when you hear some of the stories from the early days of comics, man.
But I mean, they weren't.
Like,
Nobody ever intended these to be like archival. You know, the
you know,
materials they
tipping the
used.
pizza delivery boy with drawings. Here, take some.
Yeah.
How many of them just wind up in the trash or shredded? And, oh, it's just heartbreaking to think about. But then again, my background is production too, so I understand the mentality. It's this is one of the things I want to talk about, like the influence on Walt Simonson, right?
Yeah, I definitely can see that there. Also, it has a real, to me, and it reminds me a lot of like European comics.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so Mobius would he have been a contemporary? No, he was a little later, wasn't he?
Well, I mean, he had been putting out comics, you know, his Blueberry comics as Jean Giraud for a while, but his science fiction stuff, he's Mobius. But his westerns as yeah, the Lieutenant Blueberry stuff,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think those were in the 60s.
Aloha, Nobu. Nobu is here to say hi.
Hey, Nobu.
So we're looking at Gil Kan right now, Nobu. And then we'll each do a piece inspired by Gil Kan. And then we'll move on to another artist.
That's another great page. Lots of good action.
Good action, pushing the pose.
Good layout, too.
And this one here where the panels inset inside another panel was probably not probably frowned upon at that time, you know. Here's the one you were talking about. This is the sword of that. This is a little later than Silver Age, but it's such a beautiful piece. I just wanted to kind of look at it, you know.
God, I love those.
The resolution's a little low, but
And it's a great kind of a reimagining of that character.
this is that head angle I was talking about. You see the guy that's knocked out, you know.
Yeah.
This is an angle a lot of artists avoid. That under the nose, under the chin. It's a hard angle to pull off, actually. Or well. And then some of the Spider-Man stuff, because he was good at pushing those poses. So Spider-Man was a good character for him.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's always in some kind of crazy pose.
No, he did good work on Spider-Man, and I think Ramita inked him a lot on Spider-Man, and I think it was a nice fit, you know.
Right? And I just want to throw in, because like I said, my knowledge of him probably first came from Conan. There's a little Conan. It's a little later than Silver Age. But you can see why why he got my attention.
That's great.
All right. Have you already started sketching on me?
I did.
No worries.
I'm always drawing while you're going through this stuff.
No worries. All right, so I'm gonna do a Green Lantern piece. I've got a basic line drawing done.
I'm doing a alien girl inspired by Kane.
Alien Girl. All right. So, again, just let me know if you have something to show so I can bring you up to the main screen, Drew.
Will do.
Anybody have Nobu? You have any questions or comments? I can switch to. I don't need so many blacks just yet. There's some reference here for Hal Jordan. And again, I'll stick to black and white just for the expediency, and I can color it in later if I feel like it.
Yeah.
Now, when we get to Wally Wood, that's probably going to be the one I'm most comfortable with because he's closest to the style I draw in.
I like, well, yeah, Wood worked in a lot of genres, I mean, all these guys did, I guess, but, I feel like that's one of the things about these guys is they could draw pretty much.
I want to show you something real quick. This is kind of what I'm looking at right now.
Oh, that's great.
For the face reference, but when I was talking about again thinking of the body as a mechanical object, you can kind of see that structure in there. You can see the boxiness, how he understands everything fits together. So it's more anatomically correct in Kirby, but it's still not a realistic anatomy. But it shows a definite understanding of anatomy and how things connect and work together.
Definitely. Did you ever read Gil Kane's Savage?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Refresh my memory though.
It's like it's kind of like a crime comic. He's like I got the impression that the character was supposed to be like a soldier of fortune type kind of character. And he clearly was inspired by Lee Marvin. Because the way he drew Savage, he looked a heck of a lot like Lee Marvin. I think it was an independent book. I don't, it wasn't coming out from like Marvel or DC. It was interesting.
Now, there have been a lot of Green Lantern uniforms over the years, but I still like Gil Kane's, the one that he drew, that kind of unitard. That,
Mm-hmm. It's like a green singlet over black.
right. Just a good description of it, yeah.
A lot of these guys, Kane included, and I guess that's a kind of a good connection. Uh, Kane and Wood was they both worked on Thunder Age.
Yeah. Um, and that's one of the things what they said when we get to Wally Wood. His style is much closer to what I normally draw. And you can see that in the Thunder Agents and Dynamo.
Kane had done one of the Thunder Agents comics. It was called Undersea Agent.
When you look at when we talk about influences again, I think Wally Wood would have been a huge influence on a lot of artists, but in particular, I think it's like Steve Rude.
I could see that.
I can't say for certain that's the case, but it certainly seems like there's a lot of Steve Rude or a lot of Wally Wood and Steve Rude's work.
Yeah, I can see some Wally Wood in there. I definitely see Kirby in there. Alex Toth, another one I think that was probably an influence on Steve Rude. And Russ Manning, too.
Yeah.
But I think Kane also might have been a little bit of influence on Rude because Rude liked to do a lot of those. When you look at the Nexus,
Uh huh.
Nexus assumes a lot of those like Kane style poses.
Oh yeah, I would agree. No, Boo, do you have any Gil Kane experience that you can think of? Are you familiar with Gil Kane's work? Are you still there?
All right, here's my Gil Kane-esque alien girl.
Like a little mantis thing going on there in the head, huh?
A little bit. I gave her some bug eyes. And then I tried to put her in sort of like that, slave girl kind of outfit that Gil Kane liked to use a lot.
All right. We'll just finish the hair up real quick and call this one done for a sketch. And who would you like to cover next? Wood or Ditko?
Wood.
What's that?
You want to do Wally Wood?
Wally Wood, okay. Real quick. All right, what do you think? Feels a little like Kane?
No, it looks great. And it is very much a Kane-inspired pose.
Pose isn't very dynamic, but I was just kind of trying to get the anatomy to look like the way he would draw it, All right, Wood. Yeah. Back out of Kane and go to Wood. Okay. Now, let's see. There's a Thunder agent we were talking about.
Yep, Dynamo.
Nobu said, what was the question? He says, the string keeps creeping up. Well, we were on Gil Kane. I was just asking if you had any experience with Gil Kane, Nobu. But now we're on to Wally Wood, so I don't know if you want to talk about what you know about Wally Wood again. Now, to me, this is closer to a modern style, The anatomy's closer, the shading is closer. And no, Drew and I were talking a little bit offline before we started. Wally Wood's kind of a tragic tale. He suffered from migraine headaches most of his life, and other personal issues. But Wally Wood actually ended up committing suicide in the early 80s, I think it was.
I think so.
Still beyond the scope here, but anyway, here's a Thunder agent piece. Very reminiscent of was it Hercules or
With Samson? Yeah.
Samson? That's what I was thinking of. Samson. Very clean style. He doesn't. While he uses blacks, he doesn't. At least in this piece, he doesn't have as much definition in the line art that you would see in Kane or Kirby. That we looked at so far. Now, this is one thing in particular that I liked about Wally Wood, though. He seemed to be one of those guys that liked drawing machinery. Like
yeah.
And, so when you look at a plane or something by Wally Wood, it looks pretty accurate. Him and I don't know if we ever do this again. I'd like to look at Herb Trimpe. Trimpe?
Mm-hmm. I think it's
Trimpe, because he was another one really likes to draw like the aircraft and the tanks and stuff like that and ships.
Yeah, and
one thing about Wally Wood,
he was in the Army.
Yeah,
And I think that he probably brought a level of expertise maybe to draw on some of that stuff.
I kind of like this cover because it's a very good example of the mechanical work that Wally Wood did. And, the economy of lines and the figures, compared to the inks that you see on Kirby and Kane, are kind of striking. But,
A lot of Wood stuff, the way that he used shading to kind of round things out, it gave things like weight. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Dynamo, he looks like he's a beefy dude, and there's a weight to a lot of everything that's in that page there. It's not just floating there. Oh, I love that cover. That's one of my favorite Wally Wood covers right there. Nice and dynamic, it's like you got him basically going around the earth. And
again, you can see the accuracy and the draftsmanship of the aircraft and great understanding of anatomy, foreshortening. And it's one of the things I like looking at these early artists that, if you look at like the guys we're looking at today or like Eisner, is they created the language that we're so familiar with now visually, like these explosions,
Yeah.
It's like they didn't have, the internet and could freeze frame an explosion. So they had to like make up how they thought it would look.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Eisner because Wally Wood, he did work for Eisner.
Mm-hmm.
A storyline when the Spirit is in space, and Wood drew all those Space Spirit strips.
Yeah. What was the Eisner newspaper strip that he did? Because Wally Wood did the backgrounds for a lot of
the
it.
Spirit.
The Spirit. So I know Wally Wood like hired on to be like the background artist for Eisner on a lot of the stuff. Here's a line on the original one on covers.
That poor guy. That pilot's got some kind of barbarian up there, like you're ripping off his canopy.
And again, you can see the draftsmanship in the aircraft. Now they would have had model planes at that time. I wonder if he used model planes for this.
Oh, I bet he did. I could
cool.
see Wally Wood having like a bunch of model planes in his office.
Now, like when I have to draw objects that I'm not super familiar with or that I'm not comfortable with, a lot of times I'll get like 3D models and position them the way I want. We're lucky enough to be in that time, but these guys didn't have that luxury. But like I'm looking at the flight suit and the mask, it's fairly accurate.
Yeah.
So he did some research for sure. And this is one of the things that a lot of people look at art and they don't think about how much thought goes into some of the work sometimes. All right, now Cannon's an interesting topic here. Cannon was his more adult work.
Yeah.
And it was for the military. It was a strip that was published in military, like a military newspaper or something. But because it was meant for the men on the front lines, kind of thing. So there's nudity and sex and not super graphic, but pretty graphic for that time. This would have been in the 50s, right? 50s and I think 50s and 60s.
Well, that's kind of a proud tradition, So I think didn't M.H.Cannon do stuff for military papers too?
Yeah, Milton Caniff. Yeah, definitely. But you can see there's a lot of cheesecake and like even in these simple strip panels. Look at those trucks.
Yep.
One of the things that sticks out to me for Wally Wood is his love of mechanical stuff. But unlike what you would see with Kirby or somebody, where Kirby would have just made up the truck. It's like it's a truck. It's going to have these pieces on it that you'll be able to tell it's a truck, but it's not a real truck. Whereas you look at Wally Wood stuff, and you can almost be certain that he used reference of some sort.
Yeah.
Here. So if you can ever track down a printed version of Cannon, I'd recommend picking it up. It's an interesting publication.
It's been collected. I think you can get it. I think Fantagraphics actually has it. Like if you want to get a new, like a collected edition of it.
So I pulled this page because I just like the heavy contrast in it.
Some good military stuff in there.
And then this is a Superboy comic, I think, if I remember.
Superboy.
You can see the Smallville S on the kid in the background. But this is when you look at a lot of the styles out of the 50s especially, this is very reminiscent of that, right? I mean, even Jack Kirby was doing this kind of style.
Yeah.
Doing the romance comics. And John Buscema when he was doing romance comics. John Romita. It's a very distinct, I think they call it the New York style. The New York something style. I can't remember what the other word was. New York style. But a lot of the strips out of that time and a lot of comics out of the time had a very similar look. So sometimes it's hard to look at the comics and tell who the artist is because they were all kind of drawing in the same style.
Oh yeah. Well, then nobody got credited. I think the only guy who got credited back then was Bob Kane.
Yeah. Oh, Bob Kane was in that clip too. Just remember that Bob clip.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, Bob Kane. Although history has been revealed a little bit since then with Bill Finger's work and his input.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is what character I think of when I think of Wally Wood. Would be Daredevil.
Yeah.
And Wally Wood is the one that took Daredevil out of the red and yellow into the full red.
Yeah, Bill came up with that character with the yellow and dark. I guess kind of black, a little bit of red.
Black.
And then Wood comes on and puts him in red. And it's funny because right around then, there's an issue of Fantastic Four where it has the Fantastic Four teams up with Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
And on the cover, Kirby drew the cover except for Daredevil. Wally Wood drew Daredevil. And when you look in the comic, Kirby draws everybody else, but Wally Wood drew Daredevil and all those. And it really kind of stands out against Kirby.
Yeah. That's interesting thing you brought up because there's a lot that going on where I guess the editors at the time would have other artists work over the top of other artists' work. Yeah, I don't like this face. Can you change the face? But they wouldn't give it back to the original artist. They'd have some other artist.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that.
Famously, that happened to Kirby on Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah.
You know, they had Al Plastino or somebody, you know, in the DC offices go back over and redo the faces because they didn't like the way Kirby did Jimmy Olsen and Superman.
So here's Daredevil's original costume: the black and yellow, and some red.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure Wally Wood was credited with coming up with the DD logo. I don't know. You like this one better than the red, or you like the red?
Oh, come on, the red. I mean, it makes more sense. He's like a daredevil, and he's got like a devil theme. It seems like he should be in more red.
Yeah, this looks more like a wrestler.
Yeah, it's definitely like a.
I mean, all of the early superhero costumes were inspired by the macho men of the times were the wrestlers. So that's why you see unitards, and shorts over.
Yeah, definitely.
Here's a couple page sequence for Wally.
Now, he did a great job on the character, but he definitely is better in the red costume.
And here's some straight line on fighting the Matador.
That whop.
This is where, again, we talk about disengaging your adult brain because you're right now there. You just snap his neck, tackling him head first like that.
Yeah. There it is. And that's one of the things that Wood did that I always liked is that there's a lot of black in that Daredevil costume, you know? Like it's almost like the red is just highlight on a black suit, you know?
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a really dark red. So the red that you see is basically the rim light or the highlights. I wonder how fast he worked. There's an economy of lines. You know, not much background, not much shading.
Yeah, well, it's funny, you know, a lot of those Marvel comics in the early days, there wasn't much going on in the background. You know, when they got to show like some buildings and stuff, they did, but there's a lot of times with the panels, there's like nothing there. It's just, you know, all just open space.
But he liked doing the foreshortening. This one, which is particularly good for a character like Daredevil. You can see, just in the few panels on this page, foreshortened from the bottom, foreshortened from the top. Okay, now this is an interesting case. This is Wally Wood over Kirby.
Well, Wood was a good inker. You know, and Wood is one of my favorite Steve Ditko inkers too.
So you can see how he has softened up Kirby a little bit. And it doesn't look as the blacks don't look as heavy as I think you would see if it was Kirby himself. I think there'd be more blacks in there. Like in Cap's costume, I think there'd probably be a lot more blacks in like the chest and shoulders. And so while Wally Wood was very good with using the shadow to define form, he was more economical with his blacks than Kirby would have been. Um, I did want to touch base on some of his horror stuff because I think that's where he really shined. Other than Dynamo, I like Dynamo, but he did a lot of pulp work.
Yeah.
When he was working with EC, I think.
Yeah.
He was like one of their first stars. So like, people would write letters to him, not just the comic or the editor. You know.
Wood, yeah. I think he really distinguished himself on science fiction and fantasy stuff too. But yeah, I mean, he could draw anything. He could do cowboys. He could do, war comics. That's really good.
And this is one he did kind of a little bit later, but it's an anthology book where I think Ditko and Kirby did some stories in the book. Here's some of his pulp stuff. Look at that. Jesus.
Yep.
And that's the kind of, like when you think of the pulp look in the EC era, this is kind of the stuff you think of.
But also this stuff would have a big influence on like underground comics.
Oh, absolutely.
It would had like all those guys like Paul Kirshner and a lot of the dudes doing like underground stuff. That you can tell that they like Wally Wood.
And then I wanted to end with this one because this for artists that draw. Yeah, this is a pretty famous piece right here, right?
Yeah, Darren, if you're watching, this one's for you.
Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work. So this was like if you're ever stumped, you're drawing out a comic and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Use one of these panels. That was the whole impetus behind this. 21 or 22 panels. 22? 22 panels will always work. Your big head, extreme close up, back of the head, part of the head, profile. And I mean, they're very simple to think about, but it's just something to kick your brain in gear, Right on.
Supposedly, I heard a story about this. Is that because Larry Hama used to work in Wood's studio, and like he had this up there, and like all the guys working in the studio with Wood, they would refer to this, And when Hama goes to Marvel, he had made copies of this, and Hama had distributed that around Marvel, to make sure everybody had it.
"22 frames, it always works." Said that in just Google it, Darren. You can find it. 22 images that always work by Wally Wood. Darren saying, "Send that to me, please." It's easy to find. 22 images that always work by Wally Wood.
Yep, it'll come right up.
It's a very well known piece, especially for anybody that draws comics. Okay, so switch camera. And see, I think I was going to draw Dynamo, but I don't like my sketch. I think I'm going to have to change it up. I don't like this arm. Maybe by facing arm. Let's do this like that. I should be able to go faster on this, like I said, because he's just a closer style of my own. And try not to nuke these too hard with the sketches.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to keep it loose. I'm not really good at the feathering that Wood used a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to do it well, I think you really got to have a brush, but just not that good with it. Oh yeah, Wood, Power Girl. He designed that costume for Power Girl.
He did design the costume, but he also had her with more normal proportions.
Well, I guess he kept changing it from issue to issue. I think it was just he wondered if anybody was noticing or not. Because people would write in and always ask, like, what are her measurements?
Sorry for the neighbor deciding to cut something right now. I don't know. Can you hear that?
Yeah, not that bad.
What's worse than the sound is I can smell the gasoline.
Oh yeah.
Let me try to mute myself real quick. I'm going to try to close the mic. Try closing the glass and see if that needs a bit. Apparently it's a leaf blower, not a. I thought they were cutting something.
Mm.
Ooh, look at that! I like it.
Right.
I'm nowhere near done. All right, draw faster.
No, you're good. Like I said, I draw while you're talking. In fact, I'm gonna get.
Darren says he found the 22
You found the 22 panels?
22 panels. It'll always work.
I knew you could do it, Darren.
You could do it. It's certainly easy to find. It's a well-known piece. What else you got going on this weekend, anything, Drew?
Nada. And I already did my laundry. Got the groceries. I don't think I'll be leaving the house until Monday.
Gotta love COVID. Are you you're not telecommuting at all, are you?
I telework twice a week.
Mine switches every week, every other week. Drop in the heavier shadows first, and then we'll come in with the lighter feathering.
It's good. One of the things that Wood did that I always liked was that you could tell these guys were wearing clothes. You know, like it wasn't just like all the muscle and sinew that you got in a lot of superhero stuff. You know, Wood's characters, they looked muscular, but they also looked like they had cloth on. You know. That's a good looking dynamo.
Yeah, it'll have to do. The brush. What do you think? You enjoying this, Drew?
Yeah, sorry, I was just kind of getting focused on drawing. Guess I got all quiet.
I'm just asking. Would you want to do it again?
Yeah,
You can pick some other artists to go over.
yeah.
Like hanging out with you and love picking your brains and getting your stories.
Well, I always find like, the history behind some of this stuff almost as interesting as the comics themselves.
Yeah, and there's a. You haven't watched any of the panels out of Comic Con at home, huh?
No.
Because there's a series, and I haven't watched them yet either, but I've heard about them from the panel. But there's a series that the Russo brothers did about like stories from the history of comics, kind of a documentary, but they explore stuff that kind of different than what's the name of that. They explore stuff that you might not normally think about.
They had the Russo brothers were posting these videos called Film School
Uh-huh.
on YouTube, and they're real good. And like they do one where they're talking about Empire Strikes Back, and they had Mark Hamill and Marcus and McFeely, who wrote a lot of the Marvel movies and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's just interesting, like hearing a lot of the stuff that was going on, and talking about some of the behind the scenes stuff. And then they posted one video. It's on that Flash Gordon movie with the Queen soundtrack.
Mhm.
They did one on that one with Taika Waititi, and because apparently Taika is making a Flash Gordon movie for Disney.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I'm gonna call that one done.
Good, great background.
and dirty. Did you do? You see yours again?
What now?
Can I see yours again?
Okay.
Oh, you started another one. Oh, you started on Ditko.
I started on Ditko, but yeah, this is my Wally Wood spaceman kind of guy.
I'm looking at that helmet. Very, very pulp. When you look at the pulp comics, the
Yeah.
pulp novels. Yeah. That's kind of what I draw when I draw Mr. Freeze now. You know? Back out of Wally stuff. And the last artist for the day will be Steve Ditko. I kind of want to open with this shot because those are probably the two most iconic characters he worked on, I think.
Well, definitely.
Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Although, now here's my first run-in with Ditko that I can remember was Shade, the Changing Man. Remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, I can remember pulling it off a spinner rack at a 7-Eleven. No, Circle K in Flagstaff, Arizona. Shade, the Changing Man.
I like Shade the Changing Man.
Yeah, it was crazy. Anyway, so there's Steve Ditko in the middle, and then the two characters he was, I would say he's probably most well known for.
So Ditko famously.
Ditko, this is the Kirby cover, right?
Yep.
But I threw Spider-Man there because he's known for that.
Yeah.
But Vulture. And it's weird to see how I think he was forced to or pushed to change his style over time. Because like this Spider-Man's beefier than the first ones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but this is issue 7, so I don't know. Maybe not.
It might be. It might be the.
Might be the inker, yeah.
But because
Oh, I thought I had a bigger image of this, darn it. Maybe it's okay. Yeah.
They always what I heard was that Lee preferred Ramita over Ditko on Spider-Man. Because Ramita made everybody look prettier, and Lee always had a problem with the way Ditko made people look kind of weird.
But this was an iconic sequence, right?
Yep, that's the famous one.
And if you watch, is it the Homecoming, right? Spider-Man Homecoming? There's
Yep.
a sequence that pays homage to this scene.
And I thought they did it pretty well.
But he's as Peter Parker, but there's a reflection of the mask in the water at one point, I think. Here's the sequence in the panels. Thinking about Uncle Ben and Aunt May. But this is one of the things that I think made Spider-Man so popular is things didn't necessarily come easy to him. He had to, you know.
Never, never, ever. I mean,
at least not in the beginning, you know.
And he always, he doubts himself. And he was unique.
I mean, there's not a lot going on in this scene, but Ditko managed to pull off the struggle that he was going through internally and physically, you know.
Another great cover.
And I kind of one of the things I like about this is it looks like Spider-Man is falling, but he's actually holding onto the building.
Yeah, he's like stuck on the building, like
Yeah.
doing a stand on the side of the
You know,
building.
like if you're not looking at it closely, it looks like he's just kind of floating or falling or something, or jumping or maybe. But then you notice his hands, and you can see the shadows are coming from the palms. So he's actually stuck to the building horizontally. That's a nice subtle touch, though. You love the old credit boxes, plotted and drawn with talent rare by Steve Ditko,
Yep.
lettered and bordered a vacant stare by Sam Rosen. Excelsior. Now, this is one thing I liked about Steve Ditko was his clothing. He made very dynamic clothing, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to say. Hawk and Dove, I think, was an underrated comic of his.
Yeah. Yeah. Ditko, famously reclusive, uh, didn't make a lot of appearances.
Yeah, I think I've only seen like one video with him in an interview. I think it's pretty rare.
I was uh, I was reading an interview with George R. R. Martin, who did Game of Thrones,
Mm-hmm.
and he was saying that he bought a ticket when he was a kid to what he thinks is probably the first ever comic book convention, and he bought his ticket from Len Wein,
Yeah,
and
and it was probably in the basement of a church or something.
it was in a hotel, but he said what it was is they had just rented like two hotel rooms that were like and that were kind of conjoined, like a suite, I guess, and they just had it in these two hotel rooms, and the guest of honor for the very first ever Comic Con in New York was Steve Ditko,
Mm-hmm.
and also Flo Steinberg, who was the secretary at Marvel Comics.
Okay.
And I guess Flo, because like it was just an office back then, and there wasn't a lot of like security, and have try to go into the offices or whatever, and so Flo was always like manning the door and keeping people from coming in there and tearing up the place.
I wanted to bring this image up because we talked about how these are the early artists that define some of the tropes and visual language that we use to tell stories with now. And I think Steve Ditko, I don't know if he was the first, but he's certainly one of the first, or one of the first notable ones to use this, where you show the character in motion multiple times in a single panel to track the motion. I think that the artist have made the most effective use of that. It was Frank Miller on Daredevil, but it's the same concept.
Yeah, Frank Miller on Daredevil, Carmine Infantino on The Flash would use that.
Mm-hmm.
Ditko definitely used it.
I remember seeing like John Byrne do some training sequences with Captain America like that. But I think Ditko is probably one of the first ones I can think of that did it. Now, I'm not saying he was the first, but he was certainly one of the earlier adapters of it.
I'll go along with that.
Yeah. I don't know if he was the first or not, but he was certainly one of the earliest ones that I can think of that did this storytelling method.
And he would definitely, like Gil Kane, they'd get a lot of movement.
Yeah. I just thought you'd like this one.
Hell yeah, Conga.
So yeah,
Ditko
before Ditko got wrangled into the superhero genre, he did a lot of these monster books.
Yeah, he did Conga and he did Gorgo. And they're actually pretty good.
And, again, a lot of these guys came up through the pulp genre. I really like this cover, right?
Yeah, it's great.
At least the lower half. I like the lower half. The climbing into the cockpit thing just seems a little detached from the rest of the image, but still a good cover. I always like looking at the original paste ups whenever I can find it, just so you guys can see how it translates from print to layout or layout to print. I don't think I ever looked at any of these out of the world comics, but I tell you, I think I need to track them down because it looks like some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have any of these or?
I have a collection of some of Ditko's space stuff. I don't know if it's out of this world.
These are Charlton publications.
Yeah.
Charlton, look at the street sign.
Ditko Street. Charlton, and Ditko did a lot of stuff with Charlton, like well into the 80s, even before Charlton finally went under. But from what I understand, Ditko liked working with Charlton because they didn't bother him.
Yeah.
They paid the lowest page rate of any comic company. So you could barely make a living working, on Charlton books alone. But if you wanted to do something and, you would know that you would have no editorial meddling because the guys who ran Charlton really could have cared less. They didn't care what they were publishing. All they wanted was just stuff to be on time so they could get it to the printer. And there was you could pretty much do whatever kind of story you wanted with no editor breathing down your neck. And I think that's why Ditko liked working there so much, because he could do pretty much whatever he wanted.
This cover I like because of the negative space side of it.
Yeah.
Mysterious Traveler. I like the poster in the background, the eyes.
Yeah.
This has a Eisner feel to it.
Yeah. Definitely. Because you know how the story titles are those pages flying in the wind? That's very much like an Eisner kind of thing.
Captain Adam.
There he is.
And you know the shameful part about it. I mean, you look at this and it's a very simple style, and if this were the style today, I don't think he could work. Or he'd have to be an independent.
Yeah.
It's there's terrific work being done today, but there's little patience for simpler work.
Ditko was one of Kirby's favorites. Kirby wanted Ditko to draw Mr. Miracle. Like, Kirby just wanted to come up with the ideas for the books and then have other people take it over. And he had told DC that he wanted them to get Ditko to do Mr. Miracle. But they wouldn't. They wanted him to do everything.
Ditko and Rock, R-O-C-K-E. Rock. I don't know the inker. It's subtle, but you notice he draws Dove kind of effeminate.
Yeah.
Or I should say Drew, not draw, past tense.
The Creeper.
The Creeper was an interesting character. See, now look at all these eyes. The eyes are fantastic. Blue Beetle action.
I like that Blue Beetle. I know there's been a few different versions of the character, but I like that one.
Kind of blueprint thing going on in the background.
Yeah. For all of his gizmos
And you couldn't look at Ditko's work without looking at Strange. And now, if I understand the stories correctly, like Strange became like an icon to the kind of the experimental drug community in colleges and stuff. And Ditko was pretty straight laced.
Yeah, I mean, well, Ditko was a big believer in the philosophy of Ayn Rand.
Oh,
So he was all about like objectivism, and he probably didn't really identify much with the hippie scene, but they loved Doctor Strange. And I heard stories that like Marvel, they'd be going through the letters, and each comic had a letter column, and as they're going through the letters that got sent in, they always said they had to be careful, open up the ones for Doctor Strange, because sometimes you'd open one up and inside would be like some blotter acid, or
yeah.
somebody would try to mail a joint to the guys who make Strange, And
they would look at Ditko's work and figure this guy must be into this stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, he was probably pretty straight edge. So
But this I'm kind of building up to the fantastic, but here's a hint of it going into the other dimensions, right? Get the astral projection, and you see strange tendrils and snake jaws without the snake, and I think is that Nightmare on the right?
might be, or it might be Baron Morton.
This is the shot most people think of when you think of Crazy Doctor Strange. And it's if you were a drug user and at that time, and you looked at this, you go, yeah, this guy probably uses drugs. All right, so that's Steve Ditko. Anything else you'd like to say about Steve Ditko before we start drawing some stuff? Yeah,
yeah, no, I mean, I love his work, and I love how wild and loose it was, and he definitely had an eye for design,
Yeah. Okay, so what character do you think you're going to draw Steve Ditko inspired?
Well, I did it while we were talking.
Oh, wow. Fine, be that way.
So I did this guy who's sort of a Ditko-esque, almost like a Harlequin type of character.
Okay. And what character is that?
I just kind of made it up, but I was
Oh,
trying
just made it up. Okay.
just trying to channel Ditko.
All right.
Give him the sort of weird, sort of patchwork, kind of motley suit.
Well, I'm way behind the power curve. I don't have anything sketched. um, oh, okay. Well, I'll draw a quick Doctor Strange. I'll just do maybe a bust, so I don't have to put so much into it. And
I think that's a good one.
what else can we talk about while I draw?
Well, so like we were just talking about, like the connections between these guys. Like Wood had worked with Kirby before, and Wood had inked Kirby, uh, and then Wood had also inked Ditko on stuff. Ditko and Gil Kane have worked together, and Kirby and Kane have worked together. So it's like, all these guys, they kind of ran in the same circles. But yeah, for whatever reason, Ditko was just a guy who, had no interest in doing appearances or any of that stuff. And from what I understand, like there's a documentary on YouTube, a British talk show host named Jonathan Ross basically goes on a hunt to like find Steve Ditko, and he ends up getting Neil Gaiman to go with him, and they found Ditko in the phone book, and they found his address, and they called the building where he's at to see if they can come up and talk to him, and Ditko lets him come up, but he doesn't agree to be on film. So it's like the whole hunt for Ditko basically ends with them finding him, but not getting him on video.
Yeah. Yeah. What was Doctor Strange modeled on Vincent Price, or is it just coincidence that he has that kind of look?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, considering that when he came out, for Doctor Strange to be this character living in like Greenwich Village, which was sort of known for, being like where all the beatniks and hippies hung out, and then he had like a goatee and mustache in a time when most men didn't really, that was kind of a counterculture thing to do, it's hard not to imagine that the people who made him had at least some kind of connection to that. But it's funny, it's just like Ditko probably didn't. Like I said, he was probably pretty straight. And it's a really good face for Doctor Strange.
No, I'm looking at a reference, but I'm not drawing it exactly Ditko-y. We'll see. It'll probably look more like Ditko when I ink it, though. But like I said, I'm trying to do a quicker piece since I'm behind the power curve. It's weird because I like draw like a pose I would do, but I'm trying to draw like Ditko's lines.
Yeah.
Agamotto. Imagine what it is there. This weird Y shape thing he had on his shirt. Medium-sized brush should do. Ball brush. Need a better reference on the eyes because that was one of the things that you can kind of tell Ditko's eyes, you know.
Yeah.
Need a better reference for the eyes.
I always kind of liked how when Alex Ross would do Doctor Strange, he'd kind of make him look like Frank Zappa.
Yeah. Or did Frank Zappa just look like Doctor Strange?
Well, I mean, maybe a little bit, but I just remember just seeing some of Ross's like designs for Doctor Strange. It just reminded me of Frank Zappa. Of course, now that I say it, I can't find it.
I think my favorite Doctor Strange piece that I've ever done was turning Prince into Doctor Strange.
Mm, that's actually a good idea.
It works, you know. Doctor Strange Prince. It was one of the first big watercolor pieces I ever did.
I can see.
Dennis Emoto has that. He bought that piece from me. Keep right side light. He's got it.
Ditko had also, I forgot, but he had done a lot of work on Hulk on like the early issues of the Hulk too.
Yeah, I think like Hulk's one of my favorite characters, and I was always drawn to like characters with like a lot of raw physicality. So I like Hulk and Conan. But Herb Trimpe is one of the first artists I think of when I think of Hulk.
Yeah, he drew Hulk for a long time.
Like we talked about the Marvel Treasure Edition. There's one where he did the Bi Beast. You remember the Bi Beast, the two headed?
Yeah, it's like a kind of a head on top of a head.
Yeah. So this story dropped in heavy shadows, even though what I would normally do.
That looks really good. Wow, very striking. One of the things that Ditko always did, I kind of liked on Doctor Strange, is his gloves had that weird sort of like spot pattern.
Yeah, they hinted to that in, was it Thor?
Yeah, when we see Doctor Strange, because he has those yellow gloves on.
But yeah, it was like dotted at the cuff at the forearm end, and it kind of dissipated as it got down to. It's kind of like a Kirby crackle on the gloves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then all that weird sort of squiggle patterns on the cloak, for like the trim on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in Doctor Strange's costume.
Yeah, but it's all like hints of detail. It's not, you know, like exacting detail. It's like, yeah, there's a pattern here, but it's just a pattern. You don't need to worry about what the pattern is.
Good. Kind of reminds me of Cal Baker a little bit. You're inking.
And I'm trying to emulate some of Ditko's lines. I don't know, but it's not. It doesn't come natural to me. So
It's working. It's good.
it's just a lot like Kirby. Like trying to draw like Ditko is deceptively hard. You know.
Yeah. It's like when Gene Colan comes on to Doctor Strange, they kind of made him more superhero-y, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He had that like masked, like I don't really think it was a costume. It was more like, I guess, how he like emanated his astral form or whatever. But I don't know if you remember ever seeing the one when like Doctor Strange has a mask.
Oh, it kind of rings a bell, but I'm not.
It didn't last real long. It must not have been very popular or something because he kind of went back to being regular Doctor Strange.
All right, there's my Ditko piece.
That's great. Frankly, I think that's the best one you've done today.
Keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Or the KISS principle. It's the easiest one I've done today too. It's, less complicated. So we started off with Kirby. There's my Kirby inspired drawing.
Great.
We went to Gil Kan, Wally Wood, Ditko. Some masters, some true masters. That's fun out of the picture. And, I don't know if you want to do this again. You know, anytime you want to do this again, Drew, you let me know. We'll pick some artists and we'll similar format. Maybe something. You know, I feel like I should put some weird background stuff. Leave it alone, Mike. Leave it alone.
Yeah, you could. You could. Weird vistas off in the distance, and floaty things. And
Some
things.
molecules connected by tendrils and some energy.
Yeah.
And
No, that Doctor Strange is great. That's definitely my favorite that he did.
And it, you know, it's fun to stretch yourself and draw different styles. You know, Kirby's always been a tough one for me to emulate. Like I said, deceptively hard. My mind's just not wired that way. Gil Kan I can do if I'm thinking about it really hard. Wally Wood would be pretty easy because he's closer to how I would normally draw anyway. Except for maybe his shading. I have to work on the shading. And Ditko's another one. Anyway, I had fun. It's good to see you again, Drew. Don't be a stranger, man. It's like I haven't seen you in person in months.
Yeah.
And, so I was kind of wanted. I was trying to figure out how can I get Drew to hang out with me.
Well, it worked.
So that's why I said, well, maybe if I get him to talk about some of these artists. So I don't know. Anytime you want to do this again, just let me know, Drew, and we can set up some time and whatever works for you.
Right on.
I can think of some other people we need to talk about. You mentioned some. Gene Colan would be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I've got all the Howard the Ducks.
Oh yeah. Right. He did good work.
Dr. Bong.
Yeah.
We don't need to limit it to Silver Age, but I just figured that was a starting point.
What's funny, Colin worked really well with Steve Gerber. So it's like he and Gerber meshed together well on Howard the Duck, and it was a good pairing of artist and writer.
I think Herb Trimpe that we talked about. I think he'd be a fun one to talk about.
We mentioned him. I like him. It's funny because I guess Herb Trimpe and Barry Windsor Smith started at Marvel right around the same time, and they both were sort of put to the task of emulating Kirby. And
right.
When you look at like their early stuff, it is very Kirby-esque.
Right.
But the funny is, like, as they and from what I understand, Herb Trimpe and Barry Windsor Smith were like friends for all of Herb Trimpe's life, apparently. But
I mean, we could cover a lot of different people. If we just do a couple of artists each time. I mean, Mary Severin, I think
Marie Severin.
Marie Severin would be fun.
Well, yeah, and she'd be another great one. Fantastic artist, in her own right.
One who I don't think gets a lot of love is Kurt Swan, who worked on Superman for probably a decade.
Well, it's like when I think of Superman, it's usually a Kurt Swan Superman. So
yeah, I mean, he was the defining look of Superman for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm down. I'm down to do this again.
All right. Well, let me know when. Let me know who you'd like to cover, and we'll make it happen. I think Darren's the only one that kind of stuck with us for the whole thing. But thanks for hanging out, Darren. I hope that 22 panelists at work from Wally Wood helped you out.
Keep up the good work, Darren.
Yeah. And have you been watching Darren's posts?
Yeah, Darren.
It's funny because Darren always complains about I don't want to get better. I'm not worried about getting better. And then I see him pushing himself, and it's really enjoyable to see him getting better.
Yeah.
So I know it's a lot of work, Darren, but keep at it, brother. Yeah, I mean, I'm watching. I'm enjoying watching your progress. I know I make suggestions here and there, but it's fun to see you push yourself. And Drew, if you're not already following Drew, Gootie, Gootie 29 on Instagram and anywhere else.
Yeah, and I'm also on Instagram. Most of my art is on Mash Monster Enterprises on Instagram.
Oh, Mash Monster. Oh, yeah, and that's a long, complicated story. Darren talking about his art process. Mash Monster Enterprises is the self-published comic book that Drew does. You got another issue coming out soon?
Yeah, I've been plugging away. We're just getting pages, adding them to the pile.
Yeah.
It might be a while, but
it might be a while. Yeah. Well, you're way farther ahead of me. I have like 3 pages of comic drawn from 5 years ago, I think. Well, I don't know if I'll ever get around to finishing one. Probably before I die, but
yeah, I mean that's a good timeline.
Yeah. I was trying to hit it before 50, and I'm 53 now, and I didn't hit it. So I was like, well, I guess I'm in no rush. Maybe when I retire for good. I don't have anything else to worry about.
Yeah, you'll have to do something to pass the time.
Yeah, I'll find my footing when I'm in my 70s. Not too far off at this rate.
You know what though? You know what was Kirby was like 50 when he was doing the New Gods.
Yeah. Well, I'm already 50.
So, you know, and that wasn't the end for him, and it's not the end for you. So,
Yeah. I'm just like Darren. I'm pushing myself. I'm always trying different styles and stuff. I've been doing a lot of watercolor lately, trying to get better with that.
yeah. No, you.
These are actually drawn on watercolor paper. So when I go to color them, I'll use watercolor to do it.
I can't wait to see the finished colors. They'll look really good.
Yeah, I wouldn't get too excited, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, Drew. Well, I'm going to grab dinner. I'm not sure what you're up to next.
Yeah, I think I'll probably eat something.
But hey, man, like I said, it is really good to see you and talk to you again. Hang in there, brother.
Yeah, good seeing you too, Michael. Have a good night.
Have a good night.